online broadcast network, AfterBuzz TV. Over 20 million weekly downloads in over 150 countries, and your number one source for after-show entertainment. AfterBuzz TV, the destination for TV superfans, producing aftershows for over 300 of your favorite TV shows, interviewing celebrities and showrunners, and bringing you behind-the-scenes exclusives. All thanks to E! Entertainment's Maria Menounos, producer Kevin Undergaro, and internet leader Akamai. Now, let the buzz begin!
Good evening, AfterBuzzers. Welcome to the House of Cards Season 3, Episode 1 premiere, episode Chapter 27 as well. My name is Peg Arad. I am your host for tonight, as well as...
Hi there, I'm Quinn Skillian. You guys can find me on Twitter at Quinn Skillian.
And I am Autumn Chiklis, and you can find me at Twitter at Autumn Chiklis, and the same on Instagram.
And you can find me on Twitter at Peg Arad. Girls, what did you think? Initial thoughts?
I thought I was really surprised about how much of this season was focused on Doug's, or how much of this episode was focused on Doug's rehabilitation.
Yeah.
After the season 2 premiere and how crazy and explosive and dramatic that was, to see an episode that really took its time, I was super surprised.
I was incredibly surprised. I was in the same boat where I was so ready to see where Frank was now that he reached the presidency, and then they spent the majority of the time focusing on Stamper, which, by the way, originally we thought was dead, or at least for me, they definitely made it in the last episode of season 2 seem like he was a goner, and then they opened with the funeral, so I'm like, all right, here we go, he's dead, and Frank's the president, what's going to happen? And it turns out that most of this episode was strangely, I don't want to say slow, because it was still engaging, but it was very relaxed in pace. Relatively.
And I think it's interesting seeing as Doug was a character who for a long time was pretty much just a little minion of Frank's. Mm-hmm. And then to at the end of last season with his obsession with Rachel, and now we're really starting to get to know him on a very personal level. I think that's really interesting because I don't think we saw him being so important to the story.
Not at all.
Yeah.
They definitely delved into him a lot more.
Yeah, I sat on the edge of my bed watching this, turning it on. I'm like, okay, you see Frank and the whole, him, peeing on his dad's grave. And then as
heartless as ever.
Yeah. And I'm like, oh, and I loved that. It was like, he's back and he's as cold as ever. And then they got more and more into the Douglas Stamper storyline, and I just kind of sat back in my bed a little bit. I wasn't as, excited, but it'll get better. So it starts out, he's the president, he's over at his dad's grave, and we get some more information about how his dad was probably not a good person, how he had to buy him the headstone. And
I love getting to chip away at Frank's past.
Oh,
and
yeah.
just kind of see what kind of made the man.
Yeah, what's so interesting, I was actually thinking about this earlier today because I was talking to a few friends about the fact that I was coming here tonight. And I mentioned the fact that House of Cards is one of the only shows where I would watch the prequel and be just as excited. Mm-hmm. To see how Frank and Claire and their stories and how they were, because they're such interesting characters. Anytime there's a reveal in their relationship, anytime there's a reveal as them as people, I'm absolutely thrilled and riveted.
I know, I love how well Beau, what is his name?
Who?
Beau Willimon, I think
the character.
No, the writer. How well he's so careful with what he chooses to let us know, and I think that's why that's where the intrigue stems from.
Mm-hmm. I would pay to see their history and how they came about, because they're such a power couple. They're so. Right? You see them on screen, you're like, I have relationship goals. You want to be
dynamic duo. I mean, I'm sure my dad would cringe if they heard me say that, but honestly, dynamic duo. It's fabulous.
So Frank's been president for about 6 months at this point, and he's not really getting good approval ratings. He does that cheesy Colbert report
which was
appearance.
definitely not his arena. Frank really did not. He couldn't really keep up with the Colbert banter. He felt kind of uncomfortable. He wasn't being funny. He wasn't very charming.
Yeah.
It did not showcase him very well at all.
Not at all. And so it cuts right to Douglas Stamper's storyline pretty quickly, and we see him. We see a quick flashback of him. He's sitting there in the office with his little scotch tape sticking out of his sleeve because he had broken his arm. And then it goes back to him doing all of his rehab. So he's in the hospital for months and going through rehab. and he has this obsession with finding Rachel. That was episode 1, right?
Yeah. I mean, he has. I mean, he's obviously has an extremely addictive personality.
Yeah.
We're kind of getting to know that. He kind of transferred his alcohol addiction to Rachel. He's also addicted to needing Frank's approval.
Yeah.
He just, you know what I mean? It permeates every single thing that he does, and I think that's just like one of those. You know, we're waiting for the other shoe to drop where that's concerned, because for the whole first episode, Frank and Claire were so nice to him. They got his apartment cleaned and
Stocked the fridge.
And we're, having Seth call him and check up on him, make sure he's doing okay. And we're like, Frank and Claire don't really do anything just purely, there's always an ulterior motive with them.
There's more.
And I think that was making me really, really nervous because, you could just see how badly he just wanted to be back in the swing of things, what I mean?
Absolutely. And I think the focus on him throughout the first episode, what made me so unnerved about it was, that because the writers are so careful, this was for a very specific reason, and they would not be setting him up in such a way if he wasn't integral and you didn't have to know every single one of these details.
Right.
So I was very kind of unsettled because I knew this is not superfluous.
Yeah.
These are plants. And what they're going to lead to, God knows, because Stan everything.
Yeah.
He is was Frank's right-hand man in everything, and one of the only people who really had his ear.
Yeah.
So
and so we see Claire go into the hospital to visit him, and she's like, playing really nice, like, I hope you are feeling well. So what happened? Like, tell me what you remember. And she's kind of planting those seeds. Oh, do you remember a carjacking? Like, trying to get him to fix his story. So in case he talks to somebody, and sure enough, the cops come. He does the whole interview, says it was a carjacking.
And you could kind of tell the cops knew that he...
Yeah, like, what were you doing in that side of Maryland? Like, come on, He's like, I like to drive when I think.
And the cops said that they didn't have anything besides what Stamper had told them, and I don't believe that either. I think they've been building a case for a long time. That makes me super scared.
Well, especially since he's so close to the president, and everyone knows that, especially the police force. So there are those two forces at play of, there's more information behind this. Someone who's that close to the president wouldn't just be neglected by
Also, I can't remember, are they still investigating Russo's death also?
Russo's death?
Because I mean, like, that's one of the main things that, that Frank was trying to cover up for all of last season.
Right. Yeah, they haven't hinted at anything yet.
Well, that's another thing that could come back out of the ground, very, very easily if things started to unravel.
Anything could come out of the ground now with Stamper, especially now that he's going down the path that he's going, which we see at the end of the episode, but I'll save it.
Right.
We'll get to that. Now that this side is coming out of him and he's kind of relapsing, anything could come out at this point.
Yeah, and we don't even know where Rachel is yet.
And Rachel, she knows a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, with the whole Russo thing, right? Mm-hmm. So then we get into, does Doug go? So Doug goes and sees Frank at his office, and he's like, I really want to work with you. Please give me a shot.
And he's talking about, I have all these ideas for how we're going to lobby the AmWorks, how we're going to get people on board with this. And, and he's talking about, I know things we could dig out of the closet to get people to kind of get on board and blah, blah, blah. He's really trying to make himself important to Frank again.
And he's like, go get your rest. You need to recover. And he's like, I'll work from home. Like, I'll do something. And he's like,
Yeah, why do you guys think he's so... I mean, I understand that he loves Frank, and I understand that he loves the position that he was in, but there's a much darker element to it, and maybe it's just his obsessive nature, but there's something at play that extends further than I just want to get back to work. Because he just went through a traumatizing event, and the Underwoods are being kinder to him than they are to anyone.
Yeah, I know, and it's interesting when we talk about, like, Stamper doesn't have anybody else in his life. The way he dismissed his brother, like, that's so rude. Just being like, you were with me the entire time I'm in the hospital, bye.
Yeah.
Like, that was kind of crazy. So it's interesting. It's like he's latching on for any kind of connection with somebody or with something, you know what I mean?
That is interesting. I didn't think about... There is a darker thing there. Maybe we'll find out as the season goes on.
Yeah.
So America Works. He wants $500 billion to put however many people back at work.
Yeah.
And he's trying to pull funds from everywhere. And we'll see, later on. But
was it $500 billion?
$500 billion.
Ooh.
Yeah. That's a lot of money.
Yes.
And then they have this whole thing. Okay, so let's talk about Claire.
Yeah.
she's the best. I just want her wardrobe.
Robin Wright as Claire Underwood, and more specifically her wardrobe, is my girl crush collectively. I love it so much.
Everything about her, like she just does. Yes, just like thing. Oh God, it's beautiful.
She exudes elegance. Yes,
and composure, which I've never had.
I know. If like half of the things happen to me that happen to her, I'd be like, oh my God, I don't know. Yeah, she's amazing. So she wants the UN ambassador nomination,
right?
And
of course she does, because she's flawless.
And she can handle it.
And also, she doesn't want to be just like, I mean, Claire's never been one to take anything lying down. She's not just gonna be the first lady,
right?
She wants to be there. She wants to make a difference. She wants to put her name on something and to feel, like she's really taken advantage of, her place. And she's all nervous that the nomination is going to look like nepotism or whatever. Mm-hmm. So her entire thing with this episode is being like, I deserve this nomination because of all of this. If I don't win, it won't look badly on anybody. You know what I mean? And if I do win, it won't look bad for anybody either.
Right.
You know
she mentioned something. There was a quote. I'm trying to remember the exact one, but something along the lines of, I've been in the passenger seat for too long and now it's my turn.
Yeah.
And it was, once again, a little insight into their relationship that they had. I love it. So,
you know what's freaking me out? It really is, and this is just like tiny little seed that is getting planted for the entire rest of the season, is Frank and Claire not having a lot of faith in each other anymore. Because Claire wanting to be the UN, ambassador is like her talking about what happens when you don't get nominated to run in 2016. Mm-hmm. Where are we then? And so that's basically her saying, like, I want to have a little bit of a nest egg just in case you don't get nominated. Mm-hmm. And then he is, wanting to run because, he doesn't ever seem very concerned with, I mean, obviously he loves her and he cares, but he definitely doesn't seem like he's very emotionally invested with where she is either.
Right.
It doesn't really seem like they're on the same team anymore, which really scares me.
Yeah.
Well, they've always been a very interesting duo because their relationship is so founded in what we don't really consider, especially in our culture, to be the traditional love. And yet they are so, I mean, they're everyone's like favorite couple now because they're just so loyal to each other and
That's
against everyone else.
I don't know if they seem so loyal to each other.
That's terrifying, and it would break my heart. It would. Love is dead.
Because I'm saying, like, Claire and they are strongest when they are working together and they're communicating and they're a team, and now it seems like that's maybe crumbling just a tiny bit.
Yeah, I mean, they're not faithful in a sort of like
traditional sense.
Yeah,
exactly.
But again, it's like they cheated. Like he was hooking up with Zoe from last season. But that was benefiting his
She's
career.
had extramarital affairs as well.
And by the way, she knew about it. That was the thing that was so interesting. And before we had seen all of this, it was very new in the relationship.
Yeah.
And especially since up until recently, they've never been intimate with each other alone.
Exactly.
Yes. Yeah.
We'll get to that.
We'll get to it.
We'll get to that.
But they've never been intimate alone. So there was a while there where I'm like, is he just gay and they're like just a they've never had a sexual relationship?
He was gay because of his whole thing with Zoe. So
I don't think he is either. But I was kind of toying with the idea of like, what is the relationship? Is it just based on mutual respect and the desire to like push forward together in partnership?
Sure.
Yeah. Or is it on something that's more kind of romantic and because they never really let on, they just kind of give you a hint here and a hint there.
Yeah.
And obviously
it's a gray area, to be sure.
It's like a power thing. Like if what you're doing, you can cheat on me however you want, but if that's going to make our power go up and get us where we want to be career-wise, okay, go for it. Like
at the end of the day, it's us. And that's why I think everyone thinks it's such a romantic relationship and people are so obsessed with it, is you can do whatever you want, I can do whatever I want, but it's this idea of we are a unit and everything that you do is in support of us as a unit. And that's a very romantic concept.
Man, it is. I don't know if I could ever do it, but yeah.
I know.
Same.
Agree. I really want to talk about AmWorks.
Yes,
for sure.
let's do that.
I want to talk about where Frank is at with his presidency. It's really, really interesting that our only glimpse of how he's doing for pretty much the entire first episode was through like news clips. And through like word of mouth. We never actually got to hear from Frank, because for me, like how Frank's level of success has never had to do with what other people think about him ever.
Right.
Because people have thought the worst of him and the best of him, and it never actually matters.
Yeah, it just bounces off of him.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, it's hard for me to take at face value what the news was saying, because all I wanted to know was how Frank felt about how he was doing, because that's the only thing that matters, because he's gonna basically bully and, you know, kind of scratch his way to where he wants to be. It's interesting that he's, you know, his ascent to power was so dubious and so malicious and so, you know, backstabbing, and now he's in a position where he doesn't really get to do that anymore. It's like once he's all the way up there.
Yeah, where do you go?
Where do you go?
I guess in this case, just stay up there.
Stay up there.
Yeah.
Which he's having a hard time doing. And I love these writers because they do something that seems obvious, but I guess it isn't in writing, which is, first of all, they actually address the difficulties that come with being the president of the United States, being in these positions, and not just... Here's a better way to put it. They don't make it so Frank is always necessarily the smartest person in the room.
Yeah.
And that's an easy trap to fall into. It's not interesting after a certain point to watch a very, very smart guy just outmatch everyone. You want to see him fall sometimes and win. And it's a chess match, or a tennis match, and it's not interesting if someone is just demolishing the other side. So what I love about the writing of the show is that it's not just, oh, someone's trying to, you know, bring Frank down. There's no way they're going to get him down because he's Frank Underwood and he's basically a mental superhero. He has weaknesses, and he's always comparable.
He's not clairvoyant. He can't, like, read people's minds.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you don't know if he's necessarily going to get out of it, which makes it significantly more intriguing and so much more fun. So it's interesting that now he's in the place of presidency, and they're actually thankfully addressing, guess what, your approval ratings suck.
And also interesting that I never, you know, something that I don't really see, especially like on West Wing and shows that really, really always centered around presidents. Usually when you see those shows, their, you know, direct, you know, leadership or cabinet or whatever, their team around them are usually very supportive of them. It's really interesting to see a president who doesn't have anybody that close to him. I mean, besides Seth.
Right.
And Stamper and his wife.
Remy.
Who are, and Remy, but like everybody else, like aren't, you know.
Ish,
whatever.
Yeah.
But it's really interesting that you're seeing his direct, you know, kind of team not care for him as a president. It's very, very interesting.
Politics.
It makes me nervous watching it. I kind of get like, okay, like who's gonna help him? What is he gonna do? Like, and I feel like the politics in the show are so kind of fantasy. Like, you would never hear a president go up and say, hey guys, I'm going to take away all your entitlements so there's no Social Security.
I mean, could you imagine?
Medicaid and all that stuff, but we're going to get you working. Like, it's just so over the top.
It's so drastic.
Yeah.
We were even like, wait, did he really say 500 billion?
Yeah, like, come on.
Like, that's absolutely ridiculous.
And we'll get to that also once we'll get to all the juicy stuff. But as his politics are concerned, what's very, very interesting is that, yes, it's definitely, it seems kind of absurdist, but it's actually not. The idea of a president getting up there, I mean, maybe in current politics, and I won't make this too political, where we're often kind of at a stalemate because the bipartisan isn't exactly...
That sounds pretty familiar.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We're not exactly moving things forward in the way that we should be, not necessarily just because, you know, the conflicts that you even see in House of Cards keep it from people getting things done. So what's interesting is the fact that they're making this show about moving things forward and not being able to. They're kind of shining a light on that in a way that might not necessarily be 100% accurate all of the time, but they're not afraid to go there.
Right. I'm with you on that.
I think it's nice to, you know, I think a lot of people watch this show who don't follow politics. So it's kind of interesting just to be like, if you've heard of something like this, this is kind of what they mean.
Kind of, yeah.
I was talking to a friend of mine who is not political at all, and I'm very politically
savvy.
I don't want to say savvy, but
interested.
Interested, yeah, exactly. I don't want to say like I'm a politician. No, I'm not, but I'm very politically interested. And I was talking to them about the fact that the relationships are so strong on this show that even if you don't understand all of the content, you know what is happening, at least on a very kind of human level, and that makes it kind of much more universally relatable.
I think it's funny, I just came from Parks and Rec, which is also kind of like that show. It's also kind of like a government show, but like nowhere near the intricacies.
Very fun.
Of House of Cards, so it's kind of funny to kind of like be like, oh, well, you don't really have to know anything about it at all. And now to come here and kind of be like, well, maybe maybe we should write down the correct titles for people's jobs.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's true.
Secretary of what?
Yeah, chief of who? So America Works, as far as that goes, did we cover that whole section?
I mean, I thought it was crazy that the one, I don't remember what his name was, Donald or someone who was opposing Frank during the team meeting. And then 2 seconds later, Paul maybe, 2 seconds later, Remy fires him.
Yeah, he's like,
That was crazy.
Yeah, that was nuts.
He's like, well, I'll grab my stuff. We'll send it to you outside. I was like, what? Like, that was quick. Like, if you are disagreeing with him, you're out.
I know, if you
There's
had
no mercy.
any question about how Frank would be in office, it's exactly like he is in every other aspect of his entire life.
Yep.
But Claire, when she has a disagreement, he'll at least listen. He'll entertain the thought, at least for a while.
Oh, he better.
Yeah.
I would not mess with Claire Underwood on a bad day.
She's
Not
my
even-
girl crush.
Well, yeah.
I understand it completely. She is
Claire
quite
for president?
fierce.
Can we have Claire just be president? Mm-hmm. Can we do
Oh my
that?
God, what if that's the ending of this season?
Underwood 2016.
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
So Claire wants her UN nomination, and there's a point where they're going to attack this guy named Abdullah in Yemen, and they have to go down to the
Who is
situation
he?
room.
I'm sorry, did I totally not understand that?
I don't know if they touched.
They did touch on it very briefly. I'm trying to remember back to episode 1. I'm like rewinding. They definitely touched on it at one point, I remember, because I actually considered rewinding it to get the specifics of it, but normally when that happens they explain it a little later.
Yeah.
Yeah, I assumed if they weren't going into depth about it that maybe it wasn't so prevalent.
Yeah.
Needless to say, it was something along the lines of him being a potential threat to national security.
Yeah.
Okay.
And them deciding that they need to take him out regardless of with as small amount of casualties as possible.
civilian casualties as possible.
Right, but was it episode? Yeah.
No,
this
yeah, it was
yeah,
episode
yeah.
1
So
when Claire was talking about,
I can handle it.
yeah, I can handle it, and he's like, well, let me show you this. Let me show you what kind of,
pressure.
and like a little bit of like, you kind of have to turn your emotions off a little bit when it comes to those kind of decisions. You just have
Massively,
to go,
yeah.
Yeah.
Are we going to kill, civilians? Are there any children? We hope not.
Right.
Pull the trigger. It was kind of intense.
Very intense. And she's beautiful and wonderful and flawless. And it's awful because I'm talking about the fact that she's watching people being blown up and cold, but I still think she's fabulous. Just the moment when they do pull the trigger, and it's so disconnected, and it was kind of this wonderful, moment just from a TV or filmmaker standpoint. I get all nerdy. Where you have the juxtaposition of the fact that there's this atrocity being committed in front of their eyes without sound, which I loved.
Yeah.
Very simply, like, very disconnected, and she saw it and she absorbed it, and when they left, just, I still want it, continue.
Yeah.
In the most kind of detached
Because it
way.
was like I understand and I'm still okay with it. It wasn't like she was trying to ignore it or pretend like it wasn't. She
No.
kind of like she absorbed it.
I can take it and I want
forward,
it.
yeah.
Yeah. I think that's our episode. Is there anything else that you guys want to add? There's a lot of Douglas Stamper.
It was a lot of Douglas
A lot.
Stamper.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I was so.
Prostitute. Sorry, we haven't got to the prostitute, but continue.
Oh yeah, the prostitute.
And that needle. Ugh.
That's the image that came into my head. What?
And like he's not even using it to like inject anything. He's like just squirted in my mouth.
I thought he was gonna have her do something super weird.
I
Same.
know. I was like, don't.
I
But
was like, oh, this is like about to be like some serious HBO moment.
yeah.
It's gonna get real graphic and.
But no, I mean, I just want to be like, Doug, you know that it's like it's still boozy no matter how you drink it.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, what's interesting is I thought it was like a weird, not fetish per se, but like I didn't think that it didn't feel like, oh, it's not booze if I take it in through this way. It felt more like this kind of twisted, messed up way of putting it into a system.
Of like healing himself because he's like kind of
yeah.
like syringe healing. I don't know, like kind of trying to.
There's been a lot of symbolism in this season. I'm
It's
just gonna
like
throw that out there.
Taking a shot versus a shot. I don't know. I just thrown off by that.
With the syringe, that was messed up. And there was that moment where like he pulls it out for the prostitute. She freaks out.
Didn't you think she kind of looked like Rachel a
I
little
was
bit?
just gonna say he definitely has a type. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just
if
like
he
her.
didn't before, now he does.
Yes. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's our episode.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Just interesting that I really thought we were going to come into this episode and Frank was going to be like walking through the White House, you do this, you do that, blah 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 blah, and that's not what we got at all. You know, I thought we were going to see him in his element and interacting with people in his kind of like, kind of fishbowl kind of environment, and that's not really what we got at all.
No.
We got basically just like, a setup for Doug's kind of eventual whatever's going to come to fruition there, which I'm sure is going to be the kind of
Absolutely.
the point.
Yeah. Oh, God, I can't wait. Okay. Guys, log on to iTunes and please rate and comment and give us some reviews. We'd love to hear from you guys. Also go on to iTunes, or sorry, I already said iTunes, YouTube, /AfterBuzz TV. We have hundreds of shows that we do here weekly. We'd love to get your responses and feedback on that. Where can people find you on social media?
You guys can find me on Twitter at Quinskillian. That's SCILLIAN. You can find me on Instagram at Quinstagram, QU_Instagram. And you can find me on Vine if you want, at the Quinn B.
Oh, that's so sweet. Mine is not nearly as cute. I'm pretty boring. Twitter and Instagram, like I mentioned earlier, both at Autumn Chiklis, AutumnChiklis.
And you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at PegaRad. And we'll see you guys next time. Thanks.
From executive producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the entire AfterBuzz TV staff, we would like to thank you for listening to the AfterBuzz TV network. To watch or listen to other after shows and post comments or questions, be sure to visit AfterBuzzTV.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of AfterBuzz TV.
Buzz you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.